Hello and welcome to the Literacy Leadership Podcast, your go-to place for insightful discussions on everything literacy and education. I'm Kim Bradley with Max Results, and I'm here with my co-host.
My name is Erica Glenn, and I'm also a partner at Max Results.
Today we are going to discuss school barriers that might impede student literacy. But just like we always do, we are going to start with hot topics. And our hot topics today is third grade retention policies. Erica, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I was reading an article and I saw that in Indiana there are some discussions about making retention mandatory for students who do not pass the third grade IRE test. And my initial thoughts and continuing thoughts are that it's not a good policy to just make a uniform mandatory retention for students. I already have feelings about retention anyway. I feel like if the students have been in my school from pre-K to 3 and they're not doing well, that I should intervene early. I shouldn't wait until they're in third grade and then retain them. That's just my feeling about that. There should be our focus should be on early intervention instead of retention.
I agree. Early intervention is probably one of the best things to do if students are struggling, because those foundational years are when a student is going to be attaining that information. And so, yes, I agree. I also think that retention in general is usually most often something that can be a hindrance to graduation, and a student who is, let's say, 14 in the 6th grade, if they've been retained 2 or more times, more than likely that student is not going to finish. And there's actually been studies where retention has been something that has hindered graduation, not done the opposite, which is, I know what we want to do. They just pass the kids on, even though they're not learning, and I can understand the sentiment, but in the end, I don't know that supports or does what we want it to do. The other thing is that if that next year of learning is not different,
right?
If I am exposed to the same curriculum or the same instructional strategies, and I didn't get it the first 3 times, how is it going to be different unless the teachers do something different?
Correct. I agree with that drastically. Also, your self-esteem, I
Yes.
guess. So when you're labeled as a failure. So I used to know a teacher that actually called the students failure. This is my failure student, and that follows you.
Yeah.
You're older than the other students. So I'm with you that it's not okay to just pass, because by the time I get to college level or high school level graduation, I cannot read, but I just don't agree with retaining them, just holding them back.
Right.
Unless you're going to do something different. And even then, I don't know. If that was my child, I would try to do everything to prevent that retention.
Yeah, and Indiana, of course, is not the only state with retention policies. All over the country, lots of states have that enacted. So I understand the reasons again why, but I think the long-term effects probably outweigh the benefits. So that's our discussion on hot topics for the day. So we want to delve into our main topic, which again is barriers to student literacy and ways that we can maybe get around it.
Okay.
And so what we know is that over the last 20 years or more, there has been an issue with literacy in our country, right?
Yes.
This is not something new, although every so often it kind of cycles back that we have these discussions. And I think that one thing that we can look to is our NAEP data. So NAEP is the National Assessment of Educational Progress. It is a 4th grade assessment. At 4th grade, I think 8th grade, there are different times in the school's, a student's career that they can take this test. But we're going to talk about that 4th grade data. And what we see in this data is that Black students are not gaining literacy at a rate of 80% or more,
Okay.
or are only literate less than 20% of them. So less than 20% of fourth graders who are African American in our country are literate.
Yes, that's alarming. That's disturbing, and it's just so not right. Like, that's not right. That's not acceptable. My emotions or my feelings surrounding this is quite passionate. I think that we are not working our profession. We work with people. Like, they're not sprockets, and if we don't solve this problem, which is quite complex, is not. I'm not alluding to say that it's an easy problem to solve, but if we don't solve this problem, that is affecting someone's life. It's gonna affect their ability to provide for their family, to make decisions concerning themselves. If you can't read, your options are limited, and we shouldn't be complacent and be like, this is too hard. We got to put in the work and try to figure this out. And it's going to take everyone.
Definitely, your quality of life is diminished if you are not literate. I think one of the things that we start with is even what is literacy, right? I know with you stewarding a preschool, you have the foundational understanding, but even in that setting, it may look a little bit different with people's understanding of what reading or literacy might be.
This is true. We often talk about the difference between kindergarten and that's our immediate, next grade. What is our lane? What is preschool responsible for, so that we're effectively using that time? As we have limited time as a finite resource, and we have to make the best of it. So in our thinking, we're talking about phonemic awareness. So that's what we want the children to be able to hear the sounds and understand rhyming. They can make a rhyme, they can provide a rhyme, and understand how sounds are parts of language. That's not the only thing,
right,
but that is the piece that we want the children to go away with.
Mm-hmm.
Also, letter sounds, comprehension, all of the pieces.
Right.
But the phonemic awareness is something that we want to illuminate in their understanding.
I would say that even in upper grades, though, too, a student who learns all of his or her sight words is not necessarily literate, is not necessarily able to read, that it is the combination of all of those different skills together, along with the ability to think critically and be able to look at a piece of text, synthesize the information, and gather some understanding from it, right?
Sure.
And that it often is not just happening in school, but even out of school, that I can take those skills outside of school and have a meaningful life because I'm able to be literate, right?
That's true. That's true. Even in preschool, that comprehension piece, that vocabulary, those pieces are present.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can't make meaning from what I'm reading, I'm not reading.
Right. And I think with this discussion is the understanding that right now you have balanced literacy a lot of times versus the science of reading, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it seems in education things are cyclical. First when we started, it was whole language, then it was balanced literacy, now it's the science of reading, but in reality it's probably a combination, not throw this all out, now do this. Throw this all out, now do that, And so a lot of times teachers might lose some trust because they get these conflicting ideas about or messages around what is the best way to teach reading, when really it might be a combination.
I agree. I think that some of the discussions that we have at school now around the science of reading is, first of all, we don't have a shared understanding of what the science of reading actually means.
Okay.
I hear these terms, even like PLC or reading records, whatever the term is that we're using. We need to make sure that we understand, well, what is actually meant by that? Like, what is the true definition of it? And then take it a step further, look at what I'm already doing, because I don't always have to just throw everything out and then do this. That's what it makes people not want to
Right.
make any changes. Like, well, I'm doing this now. You said this isn't good. Now I have to do this, and this was working.
For 20 years.
Yes, this is working. I have some success or a degree of success with this.
Right.
Why do I have to just throw everything that I'm doing away and now go pivot to this?
Right.
So the discussion with the school leader, the principal, is to look at what you're doing. Now look at the national data.
Because that 80% is not a lie.
We can't dispute that.
Yeah.
So we do need to look at what's working for you, and then let's look at what is in this research and be knowledgeable about it. The principal needs to be knowledgeable, and the teachers need to be knowledgeable, and then decide what do we need to implement.
Yeah.
Not just here, do this.
I think that one of the things that impedes some of that is that some of these ideas become politicized. And so if you feel like, I'm aligned with this or that, and those folks or that are pushing, science of reading or something else, that may automatically make me turn off, my ear to it. But like you said, it is so important to look at all of the pieces, right? And our students is worth looking at all of it, because there is science behind how the brain learns to read, and it's important that, and we owe it to our kids to regardless of where it's coming from, look into it and see what it's about.
Right.
I think the other thing is just like, as we do this or that we make certain that we don't kind of fight against each other. That in education, the folks who are wanting to do the work and trying to do the right thing, the reason that I hold so tightly to what I've done is because it has worked, perhaps.
Right. I agree that we should work together, not sometimes as us against them, or it becomes funny if everybody remembers why they're here, why we are here. Why is it that we're here? Most of us will say, well, we want to make a difference in the lives of these children that we're responsible for.
Right.
So we can all come together from that point. I want to do what's best, and you want to do what's best. Now let's see where we can agree and move it along from there. Everybody has different growth rates, so my capacity for change is higher in some people than others.
That's true.
I can pivot quickly. Some people, it takes them a little while to go through accepting the idea and learning and getting where they feel comfortable. So that's a valid point.
Yes. I think the other thing is, like, if you think about science of reading or a balanced literacy, if you think about a doctor, let's say, who has several patients who have the same medical issue, you wouldn't give all of them the same prescription, right?
Yeah.
You would figure. I hope not. You would figure out what each that good doctor, I guess, figures out what each one of those patients need.
Right.
And you might need a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And we are saying that more than likely it's a compilation, not a throw everything out and start all over, but not ignoring something that might be deemed as new because you haven't been trained in it.
That's true.
All right, so that is one piece of this. We want to talk about 4 others. We're going to discuss how limited professional development might impede literacy learning. We want to discuss how a lack of resources can also be an issue, how engagement or lack thereof in a classroom and in a school building can affect learning. And we're also going to talk about behavior and compliance in the classroom or in the school building. Those areas are ones that we feel could be things that impede student learning, especially around literacy.
Right.
So if we talk about limited professional development opportunities first.
Well, the thing that comes to mind for me if we're talking about PD is what I encounter sometimes is that you will have some professional development if we're talking about science and reading in particular, and it feels uncomfortable, something that I'm not familiar with. Like I was saying, I've been doing this for a while. Even if the school has had a level or degree of success, then it can be uncomfortable. Like I feel like I'm doing okay and I don't want to branch out and try something new, or what is going to be the benefit if I'm already doing this. So I guess what I would say is we want our students to continually learn and always try something new and have that growth mindset. We have to have it too. And as the principal, the principal will sometimes talk about the learning curve and the PD for the teacher and have them in that situation where it's a little bit uncomfortable, but you can't forget yourself. Like, you have to make sure that you're on top of what's current and what's new and what needs to be adapted and changed. You need to keep professional development for yourself. So everyone is always learning. I think sometimes as a principal, you pour so much into you got the students, you have the teacher ranks, you have parents, you have community members, partnerships all of these individuals that you're working with. It can be so time consuming that sometimes you don't put it into yourself. So that's, when I think about PD, that's what I'm saying. Well, everybody needs to have professional development and expand their
and not just the teachers.
Not just the
because
teachers.
You're right, because the principal needs to support what the teachers are learning, so you need to know what that is too. I think that is very crucial. The other is just those, I think we talked about a little bit, those outdated teaching methods. So even though, you may have taught in this way all this time, I always have students utilize their workbooks that comes with the Basil, and they turn page to page to page, and therefore that is how I teach them to read, but there may be some other ways to do that, and you want to make certain that your teachers are getting that updated strategies and ways to instruct, so that our students, because we don't have the same students who you had years ago, even just a few years ago. You have different students, and we need to respond to the students we have in front of us.
That makes me think about another piece that I often hear on like social media that's impeding student learning in this realm, while talking about professional development, is the classroom management strategies. Like, I can't teach reading because the kids are just, they're doing things like I can't get through a lesson. So I think when this topic came up, I was thinking about that would be an area that I would probably compare with the literacy. Like, I'm gonna learn the strategies for the science of reading and what is the brain science if I'm not already aware, but I will couple that with classroom management strategies for those who need it, because you're not going to be teaching anything if the classroom is not in order.
That's true. And a lot of this, again, not new, but ways to instruct, may have you looking at differentiating the environment, right? Which means having everybody doing the same thing at the same time is not going to work as well as breaking the children up into smaller groups. And which means that management has to be on point. So like you say, make certain that your teachers are trained in how to do that, and that they have the resources that they need. And talking about resources, resources can also sometimes be a barrier, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So in the world of pre-K, there is no budget in Indiana. We don't have a school budget. Like when I had the pre-K through 6 configuration, we would get an allocation based on the number of students, and you get some funding. So one thing that I would put into the conversation about resources is to explore grant writing. So the school district that I was formerly in, they had a foundation that would give grants. And every time that grant window would open, I'm writing a grant. So grants are ways, especially for literacy, like you want to buy books. We wanted to send books home so that the kids can have something to read at home, a book that was engaging to them, something that they're interested in. Maybe some of the books that we read in class, they could take them home. The teachers would make like a little activity bag to go with it. And that was a big finance. So that grant writing is important. If you don't know how to write grants, or and you feel intimidated by it, it's a good way to get funding. And find a buddy, like find a coach or someone who can help you in that area because there is funding out there, especially for literacy for books.
Right, absolutely. I think the other thing is just being an advocate for your school too. To the district office, you know, you want to make certain that they realize that your school may need something different from all the other like schools. So if you're an elementary school principal and let's say there are 5 in your district, but you may have some special needs, make certain that you advocate for yourself and let them be aware of not just that you need the support, you have to say more than likely what that support might look like, you know, and make certain that you're advocating for your students and your teachers.
Right, and that made me think of when you get that resource that you're being, whatever is needed around it. So again, if it's PD, like if the teachers need training or the staff needs training, you can differentiate that training among the staff. If I got it, okay, you might not need as much as this other person who is feeling overwhelmed or I don't quite see how that fits in. You're going to make that PD appropriate for those staff members and then monitor the use of that as a school leader. I've asked for this money, I've gotten a grant for it, and then the resource just sits there.
Yes.
You don't want to do that. So make sure that you have a system around that to monitor and support. Like if somebody's having a struggle, let's come back and look at it and see how we can get that resource out.
Right. And I think maybe one more thing is to make certain that those resources that you gather are culturally responsible.
Yes.
Make certain that they are going to be engaging to your students. Know what they want and need, you know, so that it's not just like you said, it just sits there. You got this grant or you got this funding from the district. Make certain that it's something that your families, your teachers, your students, of course, are going to want to interact with.
Yeah.
Okay. So our next topic that we feel could be something that could impede literacy instruction would be engagement.
Okay, that's a big one.
Yes, it is. Go ahead.
So we were talking about your classroom management, that there's no learning going on if there's no order to your classroom. Same thing with engagement. Like I actually, when I switched from teaching the first grade kindergarten and I went to 4th grade, there's like a shift in teaching. The responsibility becomes the students. So there was some places in there where I had to learn how to build engagement because I'm doing all the work and the kids are just sitting there and they're not getting any engagement in that lesson and they're not getting any learning out of it. It's just me doing the work. So I think that engagement is really important, but before you can get to that place where you can get that engagement is that Maslow before Bloom. So I have to meet my students' needs. Like they have to feel safe. They have to feel that I know them, that I understand them. And even if I don't actually understand what you're going through, I understand that you are sad or you are feeling this way. And to build up those relationships before you try to compare two texts and give the, what's the comparison between compare and contrast. Let's do a graphic organizer. Before we can do all of that, we have to have that relationship. Otherwise, there's the disconnect. There is no relationship between us. It also makes me think about teachers. Sometimes as the school leader, you can't get your engagement from the staff for the same reasons.
You haven't built any relationship.
Right. So if you're not putting in those building that safety, like I said, safety, even love, that you care about me. You see me as a person, as an individual, and you see what I bring, the goodness in me, that I can have something to contribute. The principal has to model that. So you model that with your staff, and then they will model that with the children.
Good points. I want to talk about absenteeism and the fact that perhaps the lack of engagement can be one piece, not all of why students aren't coming to school. But if I'm not engaged, I don't have the Maslow, before Bloom's, and I don't see where I fit in. You know what I'm saying? Like a student, we're talking about a student who has some responsibility about getting to school, though. You know, that absenteeism might be caused by that. And then students who are absent and they don't have any responsibility around them getting there. So like your younger students, it may be a situation that's happening in the family,
Right.
and the school's responsibility then, in our opinion, is to, again, make sure that Maslow is there and help them meet the needs that they have so that we can get more students to school, because it's our understanding, especially for students who are perhaps in a situation where my parents aren't able really to help me learn outside of school. I need to be in school
Right.
in order to become literate, right?
Right.
So if I'm not there, more than likely I'm not learning those skills that I need to learn.
I think you were touching on the families, like sometimes the resources, we were talking about resources, are beyond what the school can give, what the family might need. So those community partnerships are key, and the school leader needs to make an effort to, if the district isn't giving you that or is not already embedded, that you have to seek those out.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing kind of around this is maybe sometimes mental health support. Like sometimes that is something that is needed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So maybe another way to think about engagement too is ensuring that you have real world connections to the content.
Okay.
I think it's important to link that learning to something that students can really see and really understand, because it will help them attain those literacy skills.
Okay. Just like moving beyond the four walls of the classroom
Mm-hmm.
and making those connections.
Yeah, get some personalization, student choice in there.
Yeah.
That will help with engagement, in our opinion, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So our final topic today is behavior and compliance, and the fact that the lack thereof or the focus on compliance can sometimes impede literacy instruction. And the one thing that we really want to discuss today, I think, is that zero tolerance policies that can definitely impede students attaining literacy.
Right. I guess so that we don't get bashed is to explain the point of thinking is
Okay.
that we're not saying that the students can just do whatever and just be out of control and nothing happens. That is not what is being said, or even a thought. You can't teach if you
have
don't
to
have
have
order in
Yes.
the classroom. So
Yes.
that's not, people are throwing desks and just
Yes.
being really in a place where someone can be hurt. This is not what we're talking about.
No.
So having said that, when we were principals together, there was a little, not a disagreement, but a difference of opinion around suspension and when to suspend and when not to suspend.
And I think it was because we were together in a K5 building, and we were also, was it pre-K? Pre-K5,
Pre-K 6.
pre-K6, and also 5-6.
Yes.
And so the gamut from pre-K to 6th grade. I just want to lay that foundation.
Right.
But go ahead.
So what our difference of opinion will sometimes be about is, in my thinking, if I'm gonna use a pre-K example.
Okay.
This is where I am right now. If I had a student who was doing some biting, he bit someone, and the teacher brought the student to the office, and my initial response was to suspend the student. I'm like, I'm gonna suspend them, send them home, and we'll talk to the parents. But then after I thought about it for a minute or two, like I sat with myself, if I suspend a student for biting today, and they go home, and then they come back tomorrow, and they bite again, I have to suspend you again. It doesn't make any sense for me to suspend you today for biting,
And
then tomorrow you come and bite again, and I don't suspend you.
Okay.
So this can in theory go on every day. You can come back the next day, you can bite. In my thinking, I'm gonna suspend you again. So I chose not to suspend. This is where those resources that we were talking about earlier come into play. I need to have a behavior therapist or interventionist. I have a district behavior analyst, someone who can help the family and the student address this behavior so that it doesn't keep occurring. It is a safety issue, yes, but suspension to me, in my thinking alone, if I'm just suspending you and I'm not wrapping any services around the student and their family, in some cases the teacher as well. Sometimes I'm not blaming the teacher for the behavior, but sometimes I can do some things to help mitigate that situation. If I'm not doing that, then I'm just constantly suspending. So how am I going to learn how to read if every other day I'm going home and I'm not doing anything? So that is where I was at that point and still am to this day about suspension. That's not, to me, always the answer. Just send them home.
Right. And when we were together, you were more so, let's not always send them. And I was more so, what does the handbook say? And our handbook, for the most part, has suspension at some degree for a lot of different behaviors, right? But after some, I think, soul searching and just kind of maybe even being outside of the building itself a little bit too, and even while we were there, I think maybe my thought process switched a little bit. But I really do not agree with these zero tolerance policies, because zero tolerance says there's no differentiation, there's no individualization in the meeting of discipline, if you can call it that, which is not really the definition of discipline, but consequences for behavior, right? And so the zero tolerance piece is what I feel like can get at that kind of policy can impede your students learning how to read and being literate, because like you said, if it was a zero tolerance policy that you were following with that student, whether pre-K or whatever grade, then you would have to suspend, and you haven't taught him or her how to fix that behavior.
Right.
You know, we've not done anything, because in my opinion, the school's role is not just to teach the academics, but you can't even get to the academics. Again, back to that Maslow versus Bloom's, I can't get to that if I don't first teach you even just how to behave with others. And a lot of that, yes, is the responsibility of the family. I'm sure people, would feel like that. But if I am trying to teach them how to read, if that's our cause, then there may be some areas where I have to ensure that you're learning how to behave as well.
Yeah, I think so too. Like, we were talking about earlier how school is different.
Yeah.
And maybe several years ago, back in time, the children, their family structure would allow that they had their, I don't want to say values, but their idea or their mental model of what needs to happen before the child comes to school is different now. So we're thinking, this is what I need your child to look like when they get here as far as behavior. And at home it's a different environment, like it's not school.
Right.
So sometimes there's a disconnect there, and then if it's my place, like this is my house, the school, then I think it would behoove me that I wouldn't be fighting so much if I say what my expectation is for here.
Yes.
And everybody's clear about how we are here.
Yes.
That can help set the standard. Everybody at least understands what is expected behavior wise. And I think that does need to happen in school.
And I understand that zero tolerance policies are meant to keep folks safe, right? I think at the basis, it's like, we are not tolerating X, Y, and Z. I get that. And neither of us are saying, let schools just, be.
Chaos.
Be running around. We're not saying that, but there are ways that some of those policies hurt some students over others. So there are sometimes some policing of BIPOC students. There's sometimes some adultification of Black and brown students that occurs. That's kind of undercurrent of some of those zero tolerance policies. And even though it's the same policy for everybody, it looks a little bit different for certain students. And then we see things like this 80% of black and brown students who are not able to read.
Well, I think that's well documented that the rate of suspension is higher for
Black males, most definitely. Yes.
So that's just something to be aware of, that is contributing to this literacy rate. If I'm constantly suspending, and again, want to be clear, I'm not just saying throw a desk and do it. I'm not saying that, but let's find some ways to if we really want to say that we want our children to read,
all of them.
This is something that we hold dear to and is passionate to us, then we have to look at that policy and how we're treating.
We do. Another
thing too is just I want to say is the mentality in the classroom of control and compliance.
Yep.
So if my focus or my mindset is controlling the student, I can't really control myself sometimes. Like, I want to eat that donut. I'm gonna eat it. I shouldn't.
Right.
But I can't. I'll go eat it. So that I'm an adult and I can't manage myself when it comes to this donut or this ice cream or whatever it is that I really want to eat that I probably shouldn't eat, then you will not be able to control your students. You cannot control their or make them be compliant. So there's that piece. I think that engagement piece will help, not maybe eliminate, but it helps address it. Yes, because if I'm so engaged and I have a lesson that's really relevant to me, you will see that those issues in your mind are not the focus, and the issues of the kids have something to do. They have something to occupy themselves. You won't have so much of that.
I think exploring that idea of compliance is key. That kind of goes back to having police or policing in the buildings. Like, I have seen where there have been police in elementary schools. Like, we have all heard the stories, right? And it has to do with compliance, ahead of time. And to me, that compliance piece, like you said, does not always lead to being able to have the thought necessary to think for oneself. And that it's important for all kids to be able to be a kid, make mistakes, learn from them, and grow. And not just certain kids be able to be afforded that. I think that all kids need that as well. And it's important that just take a look at your policies, principles. You may realize that some of these are leading to that. You can kind of look at your data. Look at your absentee data, but look at your suspension data.
Right.
See if those students who are regularly suspended are also the ones who more than likely are not attaining the skills that you want them to have. All right, so that concludes our topics for the day. And what we've discussed today so far is ways or things that can impede literacy for our students. And so we've talked about engaging classrooms. We've talked about professional development for our teachers, and the school leader. Yeah, right. We've talked about sometimes there's a lack of resources. We have talked about sometimes our policies around behavior can impede that learning as well.
Right.
And so we want you to be aware of that. If any of what we said today are things that kind of capture your additional thinking, leave us some comments down in the comment section here. We will be talking about some additional topics coming up very soon. And we want to thank you for joining us. And don't forget to subscribe.
All right. Thank you.